What's up, everybody? I go by Paralyzed Playa, and I'm going to show you a little bit of my Ice Shard build. So, first, I'll go over the gear that I use. And right here on my helmet, I have lucky hit chance while I have a barrier. I have maximum life. I have total armor and cooldown reduction, and I figured those were the best options out of the pool of affixes you can get for your helm. So that's what I boil it down to. For my chest piece, I got Raiment of the Infinite. This one will pull enemies close to you that are when you after you teleport. So that just kind of groups everyone together. And then I have Frostburn as my gauntlets. What they have is a 5% chance to restore between 10 and 21% primary resource on lucky hit, and then also up to a 25% chance to freeze enemies on a lucky hit. And what this build is centered around is lucky hit. So I'll get more into that. So right here with the Ice Heart Brace, we have enemies that die while frozen have a 20% chance to unleash a Frost Nova, which helps with group clearing, AoE damage, and overall clear speed. And for my boots, I have movement speed as number one. Absolutely, you want to prioritize movement speed. And then mana cost reduction. That's something else you want to prioritize for sure. And then you want to prioritize the ranks of Frost Nova and either Ice Armor or Teleport, whichever one drops for you. And then for the legendary aspect, I have in Lucky Hit. When you hit a crowd controlled enemy, there's a up to a 50% chance for that crowd control effect to spread to another unaffected enemy. And this works for your freeze. So when you freeze an enemy, there's up to a 50% chance for that freeze to spread to an unaffected enemy. So it helps with, a chain reaction. So you freeze one person, and then a chain reaction freezes another person. And then when you kill that frozen enemy, they have a chance to explode in a Frost Nova. So you can see how everything chain reacts with each other. For my rings and amulets, let's see, I have this +3 ranks of permafrost. That actually gives you an extra 15% damage to elites. So that's a really good one to have. I got the 21 plus frost skill damage, which it doesn't matter very much. What you really are looking for is movement speed and mana cost reduction. So this build centers around low resource costs, and you want to stack that resource cost reduction as much as you can. And then for my rings, let's go to the legendary aspect. So the avalanche key passive now applies to one additional cast. This helps manage your resource costs because then you'll get 2 free casts of your ice shards. And then, so I have lucky hit chance. No, not on this one. I have critical hit chance, which I want to re-roll that one to lucky hit chance. So we also have +15 to maximum mana, critical strike damage, and vulnerable damage. So what we're going to be doing is stacking vulnerable damage and stacking critical strike damage. And the mana just helps with the mana pool. And this one, let's see. The aspect we have, you deal 20% damage increased damage to vulnerable enemies. So once again, we're stacking vulnerable damage. So that adds to the overall stack of vulnerable damage that we're doing. So this one I have maximum life, which helps. I have 10,000 life in this one, so I'm pretty tanky. Vulnerable damage, lucky hit chance, and critical strike chance, which are all the ones you want to prioritize. And then critical strikes with core skills, which Ice Shards is a core skill, increases your attack speed by 25%. So that's just an overall 25% increase in DPS. For my weapon, I use a one-handed wand because the implicit value is 10% lucky hit chance. So when you upgrade that, it upgrades all the way to a 15% lucky hit chance. And then you want to, again, prioritize core skill damage, critical strike damage, vulnerable damage, and then either intelligence or all stats. And then what you want for the aspect is the ice shards pierce 4 times, dealing 20% less damage on each hit. And that'll pretty much, you need that for this build to really shine. On the offhand, you're gonna want to prioritize mana cost reduction, resource generation, and then lucky hit for the 5% chance to restore primary resource. And then I also have lucky hit chance on there. So as you can see, my lucky hit chance, I'll go down to it. But you're going to want a 50% lucky hit chance. That's what your goal is. And a 30% mana cost reduction. At least a 30% mana cost reduction. And then I get an extra 15% when I have a barrier. So we're almost at 70% lucky hit chance at this point. When I have, because you're going to have a barrier at almost all times. So what we go into with the skill tree, we're going to be taking Firebolt for the enchantment effect for the direct damage to apply additional burning damage. And that'll just add to the synergies that I'll go over more in a minute. And then the star of the show, we got Ice Shards. And you're going to want to take Enhanced Ice Shards. And then Destructive Ice Shards, because hitting an enemy with 5 Ice Shards in a single cast makes them vulnerable for 2 seconds. And this whole build is based upon vulnerable damage. And then we're going to go down to this one, and we're going to take Flame Shield, we're going to take Teleport, we're going to take Ice Armor, and we're going to take Frost Nova, because we're going to be using all of those. And for these ones, the Elemental Attunement, you can just go with one here because the 5% chance is going to be happening. It's going to happen enough with all the lucky hit chance we have, and that'll reset the cooldown of one of your defensive skills. So one of these, will have a chance to get reset every 10 seconds. Yeah. And then I also have Glass Cannon. I have 2 points in there, and I have 1 point from the chest. Ice Armor. Let's see. Yeah, so I have 1 point in Flame Shield, 1 point in Teleport, 1 point in this, and I have 4. Well, these are all from items that I'm using. And I have 5 points in here. And then we don't need we don't need Enhanced Ice Armor. We don't need Shimmering Ice Armor. And with Flame Shield, we're gonna go with Shimmering Flame Shield, just for an extra top up of your health. And a pinch that restores half your health. And we're not gonna need the 25% mana cost reduction because we're gonna be at such a heavy mana cost reduction already with our gear. And so with this, we're going to take all 3 points in here for the 15% lucky hit chance. And then we are going to take 3 points in the mana shield for the damage reduction, because we're spending a lot of mana. Getting that extra damage reduction is key. And then we're going to take 3 points in protection. I have 2 points in here. So using a cooldown will grant you a barrier. So we're going to be using cooldowns all the times for our defensive skills. So each time we use a defensive skill, we build a barrier. And then that barrier adds to the synergy with increased vulnerable damage. And we're going to take 1 in the Icy Veil, and then 3 in a Snap Freeze for the lucky hit for the Frost skills to have up to a 9% chance to instantly freeze. And then you see how that works with freezing an enemy, chain reacting it with the boots to freeze another enemy, to having them explode into a Frost Nova while frozen. And then we're going to take 1 point into Inner Flames, and we're going to take 3 points into Devouring Blaze for the increased critical strike damage against burning enemies. Because with the enchantment effect of our Firebolt, the enchantment effect is going to deal with a direct damage from the skills. It's going to deal additional burning damage. So everything we hit is going to be burning. So with this, we get an extra 30%. Yeah, just strike damage to burning enemies, and everything's going to be burning. And then with the cold passives, just max out all of them. So permafrost, this does a base value, or at 3 is 15. With the 3 extra points from my amulet, I get an extra 15%. That gives me an extra 30% damage to elites. And then we're going to have increased cold damage to vulnerable. Everything's going to be vulnerable. The lucky hit cold damage is going to have cold damage against vulnerable enemies. It's going to have a chance to generate mana. And this will help keep our mana pool full. And then we got Hoarfrost. Increased damage to chilled damage, or chilled enemies. And increased damage to frozen enemies. And then for Deep Freeze, we're going to take that and go all the way to Supreme Deep Freeze, because that'll half our cooldowns. I forgot to mention, Frost Nova is going to make anything you hit vulnerable with this mystical Frost Nova. So everything that gets hit by Frost Nova is going to be vulnerable for 4 seconds, and it's 6 seconds against bosses. So this whole build is lucky hit and vulnerable damage. And then for the key passive, we're going to take Avalanche, because with our lucky hit, our frost skills have a 10% chance to make your next cast of Ice Shards consume no mana and deal 40% increased damage. And with that, aspect on the amulet, the avalanche key now applies to 1 additional cast. That will make it so your next 2 casts of Ice Shards is free and does extra damage. And then for the Paragon board, so what I've done is just gone through the starter board and stick to the left side, and you're going to want to pick up the rare node for the extra physical and non-physical damage. And then with this one, I picked up the extra cold damage and chill application, and then I picked up the damage reduction from chilled enemies on the way over to the legendary aspect or the legendary node for Icefall. This will give you a barrier for killing a frozen enemy. So you can see how we'll constantly have a barrier up. And then over this way, go to the glyph. And for the first glyph, let's see, for the first glyph, I'm using destruction. And what this does is it gives you extra critical strike damage with core seals. So your critical strike damage with ice shards will be increased by 70 something percent with the maxed out glyph. And then for the second glyph, we're going to go with exploit because this one increases the vulnerable damage and we're stacking vulnerable damage here. So this gives you an extra 25% vulnerable damage. And then also when you damage vulnerable enemy, increases your damage by 1% up to 10% for 6 seconds. And then we're going to go to the next board. And for the next board, I picked, I think it's the Burning Instinct. And we're not going to get this legendary node. What we're actually going for is damage reduction from elites. And we have, let's see, armor and damage reduction from elites, which is helps a ton. And then we're also going to pick up this one, which gives you damage to burning enemies. And then this one that gives you the damage reduction from enemies that are burning. So you can see how you get a little extra damage reduction. And then for the next one, we're taking the Frigid Fate to go for the extra lucky hit chance. When you get to this one, let's see, what do you get here? Lucky hit, you get 5% lucky hit chance here, and then there's another 5% here between these two nodes, so there's 10% lucky hit chance there, and then you go up and get the legendary node, and this gives you damage to vulnerable enemies, gives you extra lucky hit chance by 1% for 5 seconds up to 15%. So that pretty much reads as an extra 15% of lucky hit chance at all times. And then we're gonna make our way to the glyph socket. And what I used here was reinforced. And this gives you an extra 25% vulnerable damage. And you also get damage reduction while you have a barrier. So you can see how everything's going to be working together with having a barrier. And then you can come up here for another 10% vulnerable damage. And then you can get damage reduction from vulnerable enemies along with another 15% vulnerable damage. So this build stacks a lot of vulnerable damage. And so I've hit the highest of 125,000 for one shard, and you shoot 5 shards at a time. So you can see how that adds up. So you're laying down some big damage, and you're stacking the vulnerable damage and damage to frozen enemies. And so it has good single target damage, and it has good AoE clear speed. And let's see. So with my skills, my ice shard only costs 20 mana with all the mana cost reduction. So it also has 25% lucky hit chance. And then for the enchantment, ice shards will automatically conjure and fly towards frozen enemies. So what happens is when you go in and hit your ice nova and it freezes everything around you, it'll automatically send ice shards out at those frozen enemies and do damage. So you have automatic damage, and then you have your cast damage from casting ice shards. And so with over 100 mana, you have about 6 shots of 5 shards. So you get like 30 shards out and 1 full mana pool. So you can see how this lays down an impressive amount of damage. And so the other skills that I'm using is Flame Shield for the anti-crowd control. Frost Nova for the vulnerable damage. And Ice Armor and Teleport. Teleport is just to group everyone. And Ice Armor is just for that extra defense. And then we have Deep Freeze. So you can kind of see how everything works together in a sense and balances off each other with the synergies. So I can show you how
I need more time.
yeah. So in a group, teleport in Nova, and then it automatically sends ice shards out. So you don't even have to do anything. And then when you do cast your ice shards, everything explodes into frost novas. So you can see how it clears AoE really well. And it clears single target very well. So hopefully this helps, and look forward to catching you guys on the next video. Thank you very much.